All right. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker for today, Lieutenant Colonel Ray Brashear. So Lieutenant Colonel Brashear is the commander of the 67th Cyberspace Squadron at Buckley Air Force Base up in Aurora. He began his career in the Enlisted Corps in 1998 and later commissioned in 2004. He served in various positions, including ops crew member, flight commander. He's served on the 24th Air Force staff and as the chief of assignments at the Pentagon. That's a tough job. Colonel Brashear is also deployed to Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, Combined Task Force Horn of Africa, and Joint Task Force Bravo, which is a counter-drug operation. Currently, he's responsible for leading 108 personnel executing defensive cyber operations for the $34 billion space-based infrared system and ground-based radars supporting national and global interests. The squadron detects and analyzes real-time cyber threats and incidents while assuring access to POTUS, Joint Staff, combatant, and supporting commands. The squadron and Lieutenant Colonel Brashear will transfer to the U.S. Space Force in early 2021. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Lieutenant Colonel Brashear.
All right, good morning. Thank you very much for that. I truly appreciate that introduction, and looking forward to spending the next couple of moments with you talking about cyber operations. And so I got to tell you, this is a very, very humbling opportunity, and truly appreciate what the Air Force and Space Force has given me the opportunity to do. We have a great group of folks here getting after defensive cyber operations for not just the Air Force, but the Space Force at large. And so we're very, very, very excited about what's happening here. And I look forward to sharing some of those things with each of you over the next couple of moments. So if we go to the next slide. So every briefing starts out with a good quote, right? And I think when we're talking about here, and what I want to point to the fact is that the entry to cyber operations or the entry into cyber requirements is easy, right? I mean, if you want to do nefarious things in the cyber domain, it doesn't take billions of dollars and it doesn't take a lot of work to do. All you have to have is a good connection and modest investment to be able to get started. And so with that being said, here's what I would tell you. As we look forward to how we inject ourselves into the cyber business, we need to make sure that we understand what the stakes are and how it's affecting all of us, right? There are a lot of things right now that are going on across the world that we don't necessarily pay all our full attention to. And that is a concern, especially as a squadron commander and someone that's been around for 20 years doing this, in that cyber has always been kind of a second fiddle to the other functional communities. And so if we can go to the next slide, I want to talk about some of the things that we've seen, right? And I've heard a lot of folks talking about, a cyber Pearl Harbor, and I think we're all pretty familiar with that term. They're saying the reason why cyber isn't necessarily as credible or as looked upon as important as other functional communities is there's no physical threat that most of the other functional communities have. Excuse me. So I put this together here, and to be honest with you, I kind of stole it from another colonel, so hopefully he doesn't beat me up. But what I'm trying to get at here is there's been an evolving threat since the 1980s in terms of what it means to have nefarious actors doing things in the cyber domain. And we've seen it over and over throughout the years. Stuxnet, the New York Times web hacks, the Sony hacks, the joint staff issues that they had when they had a disconnect from the internet. There are plenty of examples that prove to us that this is extremely real. And again, I feel that some folks are taking it that way, but to be honest with you, as somebody who does this for a living, the only reason why I say it's not as evident or as real as it should be is because we're not putting our money where our mouth is. And I say that based on the fact that we've known this was credible threats and credible issues for a while, and yet for some reason we still find ourselves having to deal with requirements off of UFERS and put ourselves in a position where we're trying to still make people believers outside of the functional community. So I say that not to not to incriminate or make anybody upset, but at the same time, Colonel Appleyard said I had to send a message or say something that was controversial. That's my controversial moment for you, sir. Bottom line is we need to get more emotional about what cyber operations means and what it does on the defensive side and on the offensive side. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So how did we get here, and how is it that my squadron is doing cyber operations? Bottom line is the 460th Comm Squadron had two missions earlier this year, since 2018, that was focused on IT, which is Boss IT, and the SATCOM links. Great missions, obviously a big deal to what it is that we do, but their focus was not on defensive cyber operations. At the time, General Raymond decided to make a pivot and allow this unit to become one of the Pathfinder units for Cyber Squadron Initiative, which allowed us to essentially start focusing on what does it mean to do defensive cyber operations. At the same time, we also had the opportunity of becoming the pilot program for Enterprise IT as a Service, which allowed us to take some of our manpower and resources and start trying to refocus them towards defensive cyber operations and creating a mission defense team. The way we actually started doing this initially was through a DCO contract that was awarded to us through Air Force Space Command to help us kind of stand up that defensive cyber operations capabilities. However, what we realized very, very quickly is there was no operational rigor. Bottom line is we had a whole bunch of, we had several folks sitting in a room trying to look at host logs, but did not have the means to be able to communicate with the space operators as to what does it really mean to do cyber operations, and how does it create an effect for you as a space operator. I got to take my hat off to General Endicott and Colonel Pepper for having the vision to be able to really pivot in this environment and say, we're going to assume risk on the IT front so that we could catapult these airmen to do the DCO cyber mission. Next slide. So where we are today is the 460th Comm Squadron essentially moved into three different areas, into three different mission sets, right? And so we broke the squadron up earlier this year to based on the CSI pad, which essentially told wing commanders that you have to start moving towards a cyber squadron construct under an operations group. So the 62nd Cyberspace Squadron stood up earlier this year, and we've been working towards DCO and mission defense teams. We took our Boss IT functions and aligned those under the garrison, under Colonel Pepper. In the communication, the SATCOM mission that we had, we actually pivoted that to Delta 4 as the garrison under Colonel Borplan. And so that mission is going to stand up as a squadron here in the next couple of months. We've been working with HAF and USSF, S36 and Delta leadership to make that a squadron based on the personnel we have here, as well as at our alternate location overseas. And so we look forward to standing that up into another comm squadron. Next slide. So when we talk about cyberspace, our 62nd Cyberspace Squadron, here's our mission and vision. I won't read that for you. The part that I want to focus on is my motto and the motto of this squadron, which is what we want to do is we want to level up. And what we mean by level up is a deliberate change from a support mindset to an established operational culture. What I want is, I want our airmen and I want our cyber professionals to walk into a room and understand that they're not there to wait to be asked for something. They're there to provide a capability, and they're there to execute cyber requirements, right? And so as we move forward within Space Force, we need to make sure that we view ourselves as professionals that are on the operational tip of the spear, not as support personnel waiting to be asked, hey, what can you do? Can you bring me another printer or another laptop or whatever? We're there to execute defensive and offensive cyber capabilities. Next slide. So here are the priorities that we hang our hat on, right? We want to defend missile warning first and foremost. That is what we're here to do. That is our bread and butter. We want to expand our capabilities and build partnerships with industry, as well as sustain operations for space requirements. Bottom line, we want to lead the way and we are leading the way when it comes to mission defense teams. We're currently trying to stand up the mission defense team schoolhouse. And so currently we have something here in-house where when you go through initial skills training and when you go through the pipeline of how to become a defensive cyber operator, we do that here at Buckley. And we're taking that very seriously, and we're trying to get support to do that for the entire service. Ultimately, we also want to take care of our people and their families, right? And we do that through various programs here within the squadron. And we're happy that we have the folks that we have. So we want to continue to make them feel like they are our priority, not just now, but into the future. And so ultimately, point to mission defense for America's missile warning is what we do. And we're very excited about that mission set. Next slide. So here's how we're organized, right? We went from 3 different mission sets in a comm squadron to one under a cyber squadron. Our whole sole focus here is cyber defense. If it's not that, we're not doing it. And bottom line is we use the mission defense team to get after that. We have about 30, it says 24 on the slide, but 24 months on the slides. But really it's about 30 months of experience, and we're leading the Space Force in how to do mission defense of SBIRs and for cyber operations. Next slide. So again, we didn't do this out of hide, right? I'm sorry, we don't do this just because we decided, hey, we're good to go. And then I think one of the things that we often get asked is, you know, how did you get to where you're at, or how is it that your squadron is certified, or how is it that you're walking away from this telling us that we can press the I believe button, right? And I think it starts with first of all the guidance, right? And so we took the SAF guidance that allows us to be declared a mission defense team, as well as the training pipeline that we have for CWO and ICC, and then we put you through a mission qualification training before you actually sit console. So we're not just walking in and saying, hey, yesterday we're comm and today we're cyber. We actually put you through a rigorous process to get you certified and trained and sit on console. Up to now, we have 57 certified and trained SBIRs MDT operators, but across the service, we have actually trained about 75 that don't necessarily just belong to the 62nd. They might belong to the NRO, the 61st down at Schriever, the 45th, the 30th. And so we're trying to share the wealth as much as possible with our brethren across the service. And so bottom line, we're very excited about the mission set, and we're very excited to share that knowledge wherever we can. The reason I put the bottom portion of this slide, the bottom pictures of this slide here, is to talk about legacy comm and where we're at today and how we transitioned, right? And so as you can see here, it says that we are IOC and we have met the IOC criteria for a cyber squadron, and we have not met it for we're not FOC. And the reason we're not FOC, to be honest with you, is because I assess that we need additional capabilities for the mission defense team, and we need to be able to see more of the key terrain. And so realistically, based on the requirements, I could say we're FOC, but we're sticking with we're IOC until we get those additional resources. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit more about what SBIRs is, and I don't know how familiar you all are with it, but bottom line is this is the defensive missile warning, right? And so what you're looking at the upper left is DSP, the DSP satellite. It's been around since the 70s, so it's an oldie but goodie, and it keeps still humming, right? And what you see on the right is the GEO satellite. In concert, right in the middle is the different viewpoints that we have based on the different constellations and the satellites that allow us to track all missile launches or missile requirements across the globe. And so as you can see here, Space Delta 4 under Colonel Borkwin has a very large footprint at various locations around the world. And then on the bottom of this slide, what it shows is the ground-based radars, and that's a new mission set for us that we're trying to get after. And so right now, that is a very immature capability for us, but something that we hope to mature over the next couple of months with some additional funding to be able to provide all the requirements we need for it. Next slide. So since standing up and since getting this mission defense team, this right here just gives you the current timeline of how it is that we got to where we're at, right? And so what I'm trying to depict across the top is the different things that the squadron has had to accomplish or achieve to be able to get to where we're at today, from standing up our crews of 25 to actually being able to provide mission requirements. And so the bottom of this slide, when it talks about DCO sorties and different mission sets, and so I highlight 3 of them that would probably resonate with most of you, which is the issues that we've had with Catalyst Campus, where there was an actual event where an advanced persistent threat out of a certain place in the world essentially compromised some of that data. And we had to take action as a mission defense team to ensure that SIPRS was not compromised and be able to provide full fidelity to the commander in ensuring that the mission was still a go for us. The other thing we also had a part in was the Iran strikes earlier this year. Bottom line, when those missiles took off, our team was able to use intel-driven ops to basically posture the forces on the ground to ensure that they could move out of the way without having to have any casualties. And then we responded to a General Raymond's request for information recently on the high side for a specific requirement. And so this just really identifies the return on investment as to how the mission defense team is able to provide capability for current operations. So with that being said, next slide, if you can go 2 over, we'll talk to intel-driven ops and what this means for the squadron. And if you could do 1 more, I'm sorry, ma'am. So I want to talk to what this means for us. And bottom line, what I would say about this is that this is a very young, I guess, requirement for us as well. We haven't raised the level that we want when it comes to intel-driven ops. But bottom line is what we need to be able to plan for a certain mission set and then execute it based on that. And so intel is something that as we mature as a squadron, we would like to have that sit inherently within the squadron to be able to drive our operations. And so, again, each of these things feeds into each other because it allows us to detect and hunt after specific threats to the network, rather than just going out there looking in every which way to identify, everything that's out there, right? We want to eliminate all the white noise and focus on the specifics of one requirement based on a credible threat. Next slide. So here is our operation cycle. And the reason I put this on here for you is that bottom line is when we started this, we were scoped ops, right? So people were coming to work, sitting on console, and really did not have a direction as to which way they were going. And so by putting together an operations planning team and going through a cycle of what's required, what it allows our operators to do is come on shift and be able to have a no kidding cyber tasking order placed in front of them that allows them to see what is that we want you to do for the next 12 hours while you're on shift, right? And so I equate this to an air tasking order. When a pilot gets in his plane, he doesn't just fly around for 6 hours, 8 hours, and because he feels like it. He's going somewhere to execute a mission for a specific end state, and we're trying to do the same thing with the crew, MDT, and the crews that come on shift. Next slide. So what we've done here is kind of peeled this back and allowed you to see that the MDT that comes on shift has an actual tasking order assigned to them. And based on that tasking order, they establish one of the following sorties, right? Which whether it be a surveillance sortie, an escort sortie, a recon sortie, or a hunt sortie. So based on those sorties and the findings that we get, we take that information, provide it to the senior leadership via a Cyber 9 line, the Cyber Correlation Center at Schriever, or senior leadership to say, hey, if there's a credible threat based on one of the sorties that we executed, we were able to provide X, Y, or Z based on that requirement. Next slide. One more. All right. So operations support flight. This flight, what it does for me is essentially it does a lot of development and integration, and so it plans and executes the projects that are needed to essentially keep the weapon system. And what I mean by that is defensive cyber operations weapon systems moving forward, right? So the support flight essentially ensures that if the system is supposed to be working at a certain level, that it's actually operating at that level. They also take the weapon system that we have and ensure that there's no fail mission based on the 4 different tool sets that we use at 2 different locations. And I'll talk about those more in a minute. They also do a lot of the mission mapping for us because let's face it, once you get on the network doesn't mean that you necessarily understand it, right? So you have to do a lot of the forensics to be able to know what baselining looks like and then be able to apply it to our requirements. And so they do a lot of the FMAC, functional mission analysis, to ensure that mission mapping is done and the operation.
You get some lunch?
Hey, hang on a second, Ray. I think you got muted somehow.
Ma'am, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. All right, perfect. I apologize about that. I don't know what happened there.
I don't either.
Okay. No worries. So if you can go to the next slide, ma'am. One more. One more slide. All right. So as we're talking about operations and sustainment, bottom line is the MDT needs to be equipped to be lethal and armed with the training and the checks and balances need to be in place to ensure that the MDT can actually do their job, right? And so how does this get done is it starts with training. Again, most of the service personnel that we're getting are not coming to us as straight cyber professionals, right? They are comm and IT, but they're not necessarily cyber. And so what we're having to do is to train them to the level of expertise that we need to be able to get after this. And we put them through our initial skills training. And then before they sit console, they have to pass what's called our mission qualification training. In other words, do you know the mission set to understand what the key terrain is and how to utilize the tools to perform the requirements that we have for you. And then we don't just stop there. Once you get certified, you have to continuously come back and get trained so that you're proficient with all the current requirements and all the threats that are out there that could be potentially nefarious towards the weapon system. With that being said, we also have a standing eval shop that does a lot of the qualifications and evaluations for us. They make sure that, you know, it's my program, right? Is they make sure that everybody who's sitting console is able to perform the mission set and able to do their job the way they're supposed to. And so we do no notice inspections to make sure that the crews can perform their duties to the level that we require them to. Moving on over to weapons and tactics, they're really the operational rigor of this squadron. They define the TTPs and execute what is required to make sure that the crews and that are sitting on shift have that operational rigor to be able to do their jobs. Lastly, we track everything we do through a crew force management flight that essentially goes out and puts your stuff in PEX or Patriot Excalibur, which is a system that allows us to essentially codify what your grade is based on your proficiency of doing cyber operations. So we want to make sure that as you move on from this squadron to another mission defense team, that we essentially hand you a report card that says you are proficient in cyber operations and you are certified on the CBRS weapon system. And so again, this is something that we're building in to all of our new cyber operators to ensure that you're going from one squadron to the next with all the requirements that you're supposed to. Next slide. So let's talk about the training pipeline a little bit. Again, I touched on it a little bit earlier. what we do here is we ensure that when you come in, again, that we assess you and that we put you through our initial skills training. It's very important that we understand where you're at, because obviously that's going to determine where you're like, which way we would like you to go, right? And so we're going to put you through the training. We're going to assess you, and we're going to make sure that you get the right training before we ever sit you on a console and put you in a position to potentially do harm if you don't know what you're doing, right? And so we want to make sure that we get you trained and set you up for success. When we finally go from IST to MQT, you're being shadowed, right? And so again, your level of permissions and all the capabilities that go along with sitting console have to be checked off by your shift supervisor or the crew commander to make sure that you're not going to be able to do anything wrong on the network. But you go from initial qualification training to intermediate training. Not all of this is done in-house. The first part of it is for IST anyways. For IQT, we send you to different courses to make sure that you get that generalized training. And then MQT is literally pipeline to just what we do for SIBRs here. So we need to train you on what our key terrain looks like, what our tools look like, what our TTPs are, and we put you in a position to continuously be in upgrade training, because it is an ever-evolving domain, as you know, and so it's something that we continue to work through, and that leads into the last one, right? This is continuous training. This is not a mission set that you get into and, hey, I read the 108-page book for how you do DCO and now I'm good. It doesn't work that way. It is continuous training. It is evolving all the time, and so it's something that the airmen are extremely excited about, because it gives them an opportunity to continuously learn. Next slide. So in this slide, we talk about 3 levels of effort, right? Training development, training and tracking, and training and improvement. And so the reason to put this here is again, to further highlight the fact that we are not just coming on console or getting certified and then everything is good and you walk away. There is a level of rigor that has to be applied to be able to stay certified. No different than, again, a pilot who flies an F-15, right? There are continuous check rides that you have to do. You have to continue to evolve based on external threats, and as well as be able to learn the new tactics, techniques, and procedures that our weapons and tactics shop puts together. And so all these things is what makes a defensive cyber operation proficient, and it's something that we have to do through continuous training. Next slide. So, let me sidetrack here for a second and talk about our Yeti, right? And so everybody always asks, hey, how come you chose, that creature to be yours? And so here's what I tell you: we're in Colorado, it's cold out here, and there is mountains. And so that's what the team voted on. The reason why his eyes are red is it's a 24/7, 365 mission, and it's something that we happily do day in and day out, and we'll never stop. And so we've matured throughout our years or throughout our months of doing this, right? And so from going from ICC or initial cyber course to actually having experience and being able to identify what the requirements are. And so that's what this is showing here is as an organization, we have a commander's program that's going to make sure that you are proficiently trained to a level where we utilize you as an operator to get after the defensive missile warning. We will give you no notice inspections based on the fact that we need to make sure you're proficient and that we meet our requirements for doing no harm to the weapon system, right? So as you become a cyber operator here at the 62nd, it's not something you're just going to do one time and call it good. This is continuously evolving and making you better as an operator to ensure that you can provide the maximum level of capabilities for the weapon system. Bottom line, the back shop integration is key for us. Without that, we would not be able to do what we do. And so I have to take folks that are currently, that achieve a current status or a certain status within the MDT and move them to those back shops to make them stronger. What I would tell you is without the back shops, it is impossible to have a crew that can operate and defend the way we need them to. And so there's a lot of things that have to be done, from tabletop exercises to redefining what our TTPs are based on what we've learned from credible threats out in the real world. Next slide. So talking about crew force here, again, kind of touched on this earlier. We need to be able to have flexible scheduling, right? When you have all the crews that we have coming on and off shifts, we need to make sure that we're not burning certain folks out and we're not giving you too much to do, but at the same time, be able to plan and execute based on our requirements. And so that's what crew force management does for me, is it allows our crews to be scheduled at the right times for the requirements that we have, and make sure it gives you the downtimes you need based on personal requirements or what you need. Additionally, what it does is it keeps us operationally focused and operationally ready. So by giving the crews no notice inspections and getting them ready for the ongoing requirements, we are able to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to, hey, what do you need to do to achieve certain objectives? And so I think that's the thing that makes this squadron special, is that we are currently practicing and then training and executing constantly. It's not something that we do just once in a while. Lastly, as I said before, we want to make sure that we have command and control of every aspect of this mission set, and we do that by disseminating information as much as possible and identifying requirements and how and what is needed to meet them. Next slide. So we have a weapons and tactics shop, and to me, this is this is one of the questions that some of you asked is, hey, how did you achieve, or how has weapons and tactics helped create the squadron? I can tell you that this is one of the things that we are continuously banging our drum on, right? We want to create a patch here in the squadron, and what I mean by that is we should have a weapons and tactics officer that has gone through the weapons and tactics schoolhouse, and then comes back and actually, leads this flight. Currently, that is not something that's being done across the services. This is more of a, I would say, air breathing world requirement, but it's something I feel has to be put in place for the cyber community, in that all operational squadrons should have a weapons and tactics shop led by a patch-wearing officer that has been through that schoolhouse. And so bottom line, my weapons and tactics shop right now is being led by a lieutenant who was a 1 Bravo 4 before, and was a master sergeant, and is now a lieutenant, has a lot of offensive cyber experience and defensive cyber experience. And so he's able to do things that I think the average person can't, based on his background and experience. And so bottom line, weapons and tactics gives me the operational rigor that I need for the MDT to plan, execute, debrief all the mission sets. Ultimately, that leads into operations improvement by basically taking our lessons learned and applying them across the squadron. I tell you what, he does a great job being able to maintain checklists and identify different mission sets and different requirements, so that in the future we can take things off the shelf and either train to or apply based on our lessons learned. The last thing, again, this is the backbone really to what it is that we do here in terms of building the MDT and exercising it. Next slide. So what have we done, right? This is one of the return on investments that I wanted to kind of highlight here is we've created an MDT playbook, and it was the 60 seconds MDT playbook. We wrote this for the squadron, and what's happened is in a very short time, Space Force has adopted our MDT playbook to make it the service playbook. And as of early as last week, General Radigi now wants to make this the Department of Air Force MDT playbook. And what it does is it takes our 3 years of lessons learned and essentially tells other comm squadrons how it is that you're supposed to do defensive cyber operations, or how you're supposed to create an MDT, and how do you pivot from a comm squadron to a cyber squadron. And what I can tell you, and what we start out with is there is some level of risk that you will have to assume as a Delta owner or as a wing commander, because the IT requirements that you currently have, as we all know, have really matured out of nothing, right? I mean, when I was an airman in A1C 20 years ago and went to Vandenberg, what I can tell you is 90% of the squadron was always asking, hey, where are we supposed to get more resources to do all these other things? we as comm squadrons have been task saturated by requirements that don't necessarily fit in anybody else's bucket, but for some reason they've ended up on our lap, and that's how we've been kind of, you know, robbing Peter to pay Paul to get after these requirements. And so this is one of the things that as we've created this MDT playbook, we've highlighted is that if it's not related to the mission of the base, it is no longer my responsibility as a comm squadron commander or a cyber squadron commander to perform those mission sets. And so that's where you have to start out first, is adjusting your desire for or appetite for what it is that you're going to receive going forward as you stand up a mission defense team. So again, we highlight that very clearly. We also talk about this is ITAS agnostic. People and squadron commanders and a lot of wing commanders are thinking, well, the only reason why the 62nd is so far ahead is because ITAS came and was able to give you that breadth or that ability to pivot some of your manpower away from IT requirements over to mission defense team. Here's what I would tell you, and what I've told Colonel Pepper and everybody else who's come see me. General Whiting was here last week. I shared the same thing with him. Bottom line is, without ITAS, we could still get through this, because what would happen is, if you take your squadron right now as a comm squadron and you say, hey, this flight is going to be my IT flight and this flight is going to be my MDT flight, you could get after this. There's no reason why it has to be 30 people strong today, but you can start with 5 or 10 people today. And so bottom line is, you got to crawl before you run. And if we're really going to get after mission defense teams, it's not going to be because the Air Force or Space Force is going to give us a lot more people or a lot more resources. You're going to have to make do with what you have, and you're going to have to assume risk in certain mission sets, right? So if you had a ticketing requirement before where you opened a ticket and someone answered it for you in 20 minutes or 30 minutes, that might have to change to, you may not be able to get a response for 2 days, because you're going to take that CFP individual and now he's going to be working MDT. And so now, instead of your end strength for your CFP being 5 people, it might be 4 people or 3. But whatever that looks like, you're going to have to adjust your appetite for what your IT footprint is and what your mission defense team footprint is. The other thing is we talk about aligning to a mission set. And so for us, it's SIBRs. And so it's a very easy transition because it's high on General Raymond's scope as to what is important, right? If you talk about weapon systems that are important for Space Force, that's number 1. And so we ask every squadron commander to go out there and identify what is your weapon system, what is your requirement, and align resources against that, because as we all know, that's where the dollars come from. It's very hard to try to get someone to buy into something that the space professionals are not emotional about. And so that's what I would tell everyone is hey, as much as I love, Nipper, Sipper, Genser, it is very low on everybody's priority. And I think we can all agree as a functional community, that's why we have such a hard time trying to get the investments we want when it comes to our functional community. And so bottom line is, you have to find the mission set that you're aligned against. Again, for us, it's SIBRs. And so what is it for you at the 45th or at the 30th or at the 21st? We need to go to those places and identify your weapon system and say, here's what I'm going to do with my resources, right? Yes, capability is going to come down on the IT side, but it's because we're going to raise capability for the mission defense team to defend whatever that weapon system is. But again, as we close up here, we close up for the playbook is you have to reorganize your squadron. You have to conduct functional mission analysis of your cyber key terrain. And you have to research your mission defense team plan and then get after it, right? You have to take risks, and you have to be able to identify what your end state's going to be and be able to articulate and present that to your wing leadership or Delta leadership. Otherwise, you're never going to get started. Next slide. So we're going to pivot a little bit to the difference between a CPT and an MDT, right? A cyber protection team and a mission defense team. And so what I've highlighted here is some of the different capabilities that a cyber protection team gives you. But as we all know, what a cyber protection team does and where it's at is it's at the COCOM level. And let's face it, they come in when requested to provide support. They are not functional experts of your weapon system or the key terrain, but they have tool sets and capabilities that allow you to get to a desired end state based on what they bring to bear. So CPTs are obviously used through the 67th and through Cybercom, which, you know, we wholeheartedly appreciate, but I have my own personal desires or druthers about where they're at and where we're going as a mission defense team. And so, as you can see here at the left side, we talk about, you know, they do functional mission analysis, they do passive network monitoring, they do hunt missions, threat emulation, and risk assessment, right? All things that are extremely valuable and important, and definitely want to continue to have those capabilities. But they share different requirements, in my opinion, than what it is that we do as a mission defense team. And so if we go to the next slide, we kind of talk about what it is that they do when they come to your base, right? They do a lot of planning, surveying, securing, then they do some protection, recover, and reconstitute. So this is their model. This is what they do based on the current requirement that you may have at your location, or based on a specific mission set, which all requires them to go through this every single time there is a anomaly or a threat or a mission at your location. They have to go through each one of these different levels of capability. So if you go to the next slide, we'll talk about what's near and dear to my heart, which is the mission defense team. As you can see, we provide nearly the same things. The differences between us is we are aligned to a specific mission system. So we are not going to come in and have to relearn your key terrain. We're already there 24/7, 365, providing defensive cyber operations for you. So for SIBRs, I don't see a time where a CPT is going to come and move us out of the way or move us out of our chair so that they can execute their mission set. And the reason I say that is because, again, we know the key terrain, we operate the key terrain, and we defend against it every single day. Now, if you're talking about the different levels of authorities that there is between the two of us, completely understand that, but I see that changing in the future because this mission defense team should be able to play soccer what I mean by that is when we are on the field, we're playing defense constantly, but within blue space, I need to go from defensive to offensive based on the requirement. There shouldn't be a need for me to call another entity or another squadron to come in and relieve me of my mission set so that they can inject themselves and play offense within blue space. And so I don't see Ray Brashear's opinion. I don't see a time where I should ever have to call another squadron commander to say, hey, tag, you're in, because now I need you to play offense. And so again, it's soccer, it's basketball, however you want to do the analogy. I believe truly that in the future, we will be doing that with those same authorities within Space Force. So here's the construct of what my squadron currently does. Let me see, can you go, let me see, one more slide? There we go. All right, perfect. So here's how we're currently organized when we're talking about the crew construct. Did that not make it to your slide? There should be a crew construct slide. If you can go back one. Okay, perfect. So here's how the squadron's laid out. We currently have dual ops based on two different locations, right? We sit console with the space operators on the SOC floor, and we also have our additional footprint here in the cyber operations response element in my building. And so the reason we've done this is, one, we want to make sure that we have a liaison between the SOC commander, who is reporting directly to the mission commander and SPOC leadership whenever there's a cyber threat. So that cyber crew lead in turn works with the incident responder to respond to any anomalous activities. And they have also elevated privileges to be able to execute the mission set. So again, that sits on the MCS SOC floor. On the right side of this chart, what you see is the crew that sits here local with me. And the reason why some of these are yellow, for example, the indications of warning, is this is our intel feed that's going to be able to provide, no kidding, a threat signal. I'm sorry, it's going to work to develop threat signatures with the intel with the intel community to ensure that we're meeting that requirement. And so that's something new for us, and that's something that we want to grow and will grow with time. But right now, it's very young in nature, and we continue to ask for additional resources to make sure that we're able to do this in-house all the time. Hosted tech and network tech operators, they monitor host systems and indications that are compromised, and then they investigate anomalous activities. And then electronic warfare, that's a new mission set again for us. We're doing this in-house. The EW footprint for the cyber squadron is very small right now, but it's something that's very much needed based on what it is that we do for a living, right? And so, again, a lot of the tools that go along with our EW capability are very young in nature, but we're maturing them as much as possible and as fast as possible, because everybody recognizes and realizes that this is a very big part of how we provide capability within the Space Force. Next slide. All right, so as we talk about the differences between the CPTs and MDTs, again, you heard me talk about the two. Again, I'm emotional mainly because I control a squadron that has a mission defense team. What I would tell you is what it says in the bottom here. MDTs are preferred to CPTs for persistence, expert cyber defense of space mission systems. Bottom line is I need a constant presence 24/7, 365. I don't need a team that's going to come in and spell me when things go wrong. It is not something we can afford. It is not something that we can do, which is why General Raymond and the rest of the team, along with General Whiting, have placed us here to be able to have a constant presence for SBIRs. And so definitely happy to be a squadron commander of the squadron, extremely excited about the mission set that we're doing, and just looking forward to every day of coming to work. So with that being said, that's all I have. Hopefully that provided some light into what it is that we do for a living here at the 62nd, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Colonel Brashear. You did a good job asking the pertinent, asking the questions that should drive some additional questions. A little bit of a hot seat. You had stated in kind of your opening on the ground-based radars that are immature. Is that because the GBRs are immature, the personnel are immature, or the hardware, software, IT is immature? Or the mission set? I'll give you all four COAs.
Yes, sir. No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And great question. Here's what I would tell you. The mission set is not immature. The cyber and IT requirements are immature in that we as a service have not invested the right level of requirements when it comes to the defense of the GBRs. And so what I am doing for SBIRs took an on-purpose, deliberate approach to get there, and the visibility that we have for the key terrain and the tool sets that we use definitely allow us to be at a greater state than we are for the GBRs.
Good answer. How have you handled spelling out the different cyber roles and responsibilities when it comes to the mission defense teams versus the information system security manager? The launch ranges are grappling with this now and have chosen to establish a memorandum of agreement that spells out the different roles and responsibilities. Do you have a good answer for that one for the launch ranges?
So here's what I would tell you about that is first of all, again, as I stated earlier, this does not come without a level of risk that you're going to have to assume. And so some of it is unbroken ground where you're going to have to pivot from what you used to do to what you're doing now when it comes to mission defense teams and operations. And so how I would get after this is exactly what they're doing, right? Is you have to develop some type of level of rigor when it talks about who's responsible for what. Because let's face it, there's a lot of requirements that have been handed to each of these squadrons, whether it be the Space Launch Range Squadrons or us here at Buckley, that didn't come without support and manpower and everything else to go along with it. So I think we have to establish ourselves by asking the question, what is it that's the most important, and what is it that we're going to be asked to do and perform? Because, you know, we're trying to do too much, and it's all spilling out of this bucket, and we have to decide what's going to stay in and what's going to move out.
Okay. What are the biggest advanced persistence threat, the groups that is, behavior that you're most interested in tracking?
To be honest with you, some of that bleeds into the classified conversation. And so
that's why we're asking you. No, I'm just kidding.
I hesitated answering that question.
Okay. What role has DevSecOps played in the transition to the cyberspace squadron and in the mission defense teams?
Oh, huge critical role. Bottom line is it's something that I talked to Colonel Rockwell about, and we're discussing at the Delta 6 level. How do we do this going forward? Because we recognize that the fact that there needs to be the DevSecOps portion of this to go forward, sitting locally with the operators to make us better. So we know and assess that this is something that going forward as a commander, we're going to have to be able to apply at the Delta level to ensure that all the squadrons are able to reap the benefits of that. Right now, some of that or a lot of that is being done through SMC and entities outside of the Delta and outside of the squadron.
Very good. What is your most significant shortfall in delivering your robust mission capability that we can help in, business or otherwise?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. And here's what I would tell you is bottom line is the tool sets are the shortfalls. There's tool sets out there that will allow my mission set to work a lot easier. For example, we have to use several different pieces of glass to be able to get all the information to the operator. And the more pieces of glass he has in front of him, basically degrades the human element or the person that's looking at that data. At some point, it becomes white noise, right? And so we have to be able to ingest the data from several different platforms and make it easier for someone to ascertain what the threat is and be able to respond to it. And so as we move forward with requirements and capabilities, we need to really get to a common platform within DCO for space that does all of that. And more importantly, that we are resourced and budgeted for to be able to get training, to be able to execute, and to be able to continuously maintain that.
All right, this is a paid public. CrowdStrike wants to talk to you. Are you open? Your door open?
Roger.
All right, there you go, CrowdStrike, because I won't ask the rest. Let's see. What platforms do you currently use?
Yeah, too easy. So we use Manacore and CVAH.
Okay.
I'm sorry, and Logarithm.
And Logarithm.
And Logarithm.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I'll ask you one more. If all will agree to stay on for a few minutes more. In regards to DevSecOps, are you working with Platform One or other software factories, or are you thinking about using other transaction authorities contracts to get support out of DevSecOps?
So here's what I would say as a commander, and the part that I think as a service we need to get behind. I'm having a hard time not getting emotional about this one because here's the thing. I don't necessarily, and I don't mean no disrespect by this, but understand where I'm coming from. I'm not emotionally tied to any weapon system. What I am tied to is as long as the Air Force or Space Force gives us the training dollars and the manpower and the requirements to do this through a program of record, that's what I want to tie myself to. And so we need to figure out as a functional community, what does that look like going forward so that we're not doing this business out of hide through UFERs and through things that do not make sense.
Very good. I'll stop it there. Vanessa, I'm going to pass it over to you if I could.
Yep. Appreciate it, Jim.
Yes,
Colonel
ma'am.
Brashear, I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come and give us a little insight into the 67th Cyberspace Squadron. I think that was pretty interesting. I know I'm MDTs and CPTs and all that fun stuff. just starting up as I was getting out of the service. So to get that better insight into what's going on these days is pretty interesting, in my opinion. So anyway, if this were an in-person event, I would be handing you a chapter coin right now as a token of our appreciation for you speaking to us today. So I'm gonna have to get your mailing address and mail you one, because that's what we're stuck with right now.
No worries, no worries. Well, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to talk to all of you. It really has been a pleasure, and I really am sorry that we can't meet in person, but hopefully in the future I'll get to shake some of your hands and say thank you for what you do as well.
Yeah, if we have a Rocky Mountain Cyberspace Symposium, we'll have to get you down here in March. We'll see how that all plays out. But again, thank you for being here with us. I want to thank everybody on the phone for being here. Wish you all a happy Thanksgiving, because that's literally next week. And happy holidays, since we won't see anybody until January. But take care. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Hey, Ray, thanks again. And Phil gives his love back to you, bud.
Oh, thank you. Tell him I said thank you as well.
All right.
All right. Take care, sir.
See you, bud.
Take care.
Out here.